In the previous episode, we explored ways to get back on track when uncertainty distracts us from achieving our goals. Today, we'll map out how goal setting factors into times of healing and working through tough stuff. Ever find yourself lost as you try to recover from some emotional or physical crisis? As we enter into this tough terrain today, I'd like to make an important distinction. Being lost does not translate as you are wrong. It's interesting that even our GPS audio is programmed to say, recalculating route. It doesn't say, you made a mistake, you made a wrong turn, dummy. Turn back around, you fool. Every step of the guided path, even those missteps, are all part of us finding our way and learning as we go. When I finally understood how this concept worked, I began to understand how learning and planning were vital to achieving anything. I'm excited to break these concepts down in simple terms over the next few episodes, and I hope that you're encouraged to begin putting some of these strategies into practice. Today, we're going to begin the groundwork to lay out the many crossover areas in our lives that we practice goal setting. In this episode, you'll gain insights into how multifaceted goal setting is. You'll hear about my breakthrough moments in how to organize and begin, and you'll see how simple planning strategies really do set us up to experience personal success. Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence but feel stuck in a fog of uncertainty? If you're ready to gain clarity on your goals and cut yourself free from the fear, self-doubt, and worry holding you back, this show is for you. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and clarity coach. I help women like you restore their inner worlds and get clear on their goals to confidently fulfill their greatest desires. Ready to restore your inner warrior? Then turn off those distractions and tune in to this next episode. Hey girl, are you tired of living in a fog of uncertainty when it comes to fully imagining and achieving your goals? Let me show you how to chart out your goals with a customized map that pinpoints exactly where to start and which direction to go first. My Zero to Clear Clarity Coaching simplifies this process and helps you tap into resources already within reach. Zero to Clear will help you fully imagine your goals, map out actionable steps to take, and show you how to finally begin that journey toward finding personal success. You don't need to keep throwing away money and precious time or feeling defeated by uncertainty, worry, and stress. Just like that personal success you crave, clearly seeing, setting, and working toward those goals should feel good and fulfilling, and you will be able to see and feel progress along the way with my coaching. Book a Zero to Clear coaching call and let me show you how easy it is to begin living your best life today. Use the link below or find one at restoreyourInnerWarrior.org/0-2-clear-coaching. Did you ever consider how everything we do has some sort of plan attached to it? Even leaving the house begins and transpires with plans. You don't just leave the house. You have someplace you have to be, you have things you have to do when you get there. Perhaps you have things that you have to bring with you. There's certain things that you have to do to get ready. There's a certain way that you have to get ready and present yourself depending on where exactly you are going. There's all this planning involved and all the different steps and maybe the different interactions that you have to engage in while you're out there. Well, I've worked with coaching clients on all sorts of planning. So people hire me to help them plan things. And I didn't always have these skills really fine-tuned. And it was amazing that once I started getting good at planning, the people in my immediate circle started noticing. And those are my first clients. Those are the people who are like, hey, they knew I was a freelancer. Can I hire you to help me with this? Can I call you up and work through this particular thinking process? And so that's how initially some of my freelance work began with coaching. And I mean, I was doing anything from like projects and business models to event planning and even team building. And what I want to open with here today is I want to talk about like, what are the consequences of not having a plan? So when we think about like grocery shopping, for instance, that's a great example for us to use here. Grocery shopping is one of those things where if you don't have a plan, it could be a disaster. Even if you're only going in for a few items, not having a plan could be a disaster in a different way. While you might not forget anything on your list of, say, like 5 things that you went in there for, you're going to get up to the register and you're going to have like 10 things in there that you didn't come in there for. And in this type of economy, that is not a good thing to happen at the checkout counter. But you also have the big shopping trips. If you're like I am, I live out in the country, and so there aren't any stores just around the corner. I mean, we have a Dollar General now, but you don't do all of your shopping at the Dollar General. So when I go to the store, I usually go to several stores, and I have to have a plan. I have to know where I'm going, how much time I have while I'm out there, where I should go first, depending on, like, I'm obviously going to go grocery shopping first because I have perishable items that have to stay frozen. So that's probably going to be the last thing I do unless it's super cold. So there's all these different factors that come into play, but I have a list. And even if I don't have a list, I might have like bullet points of things where I'm like, okay, we're out of dairy, we're out of this. And I might just have like maybe 5 or 6 things. So I don't have a full list because I go to a small store. I love Aldi. That's usually my go-to, or Trader Joe's. And the store is small, so I can't get lost in the store. And I just have my same pattern and same behavior where I go through the aisles. But every single time I don't have a list of the things that I've run out of at home, I miss a few things, not just one thing. I miss a few things. And it's not the kind of things where you're at the checkout and you're like, oh man, and you can run back in the store and get it. It's like when you get home and you're like, we don't have any more olive oil. That's kind of a big deal. How are you going to cook without oil? Having the plan helps you be successful. Obviously, not everything's going to make it on the list, but even the way that the store is set up and how you navigate the store to be successful and to not be stuck in the store all day long. No one wants to be grocery shopping all day long. So having your lists and having your plan in place of what stores I'm going to hit first, and you think about, like, if I'm going to hit more than one store that has the food in it, like, okay, if they don't have this, then I got to move things over to the other list and those types of things too. So now you have lists within lists and list transfers and all those different things. But I think the grocery shopping thing is a great example of how this type of planning and list making exists in our everyday lives. Like, we do it all the time. I used to have a really hard time planning everything out in finer detail. I'm not going to lie to you. I used to hate it. And I was very spontaneous. I was like, oh, let's just let things play out organically. I didn't even plan when I was going to go to the grocery store. We're talking about like back in my 20s. I didn't plan when I was going to go to the grocery store. I didn't often go with a list. I was just like, oh my God, we don't have food. I'm on my way home from doing something else. I probably should go through the store really quick and get us food. And it was a disaster because I didn't do meal planning back then. And so you can fill up your pantry with a whole bunch of crap. And if you're not aware of what's already in your pantry and what's already in your fridge, getting more of the same crap that you don't want to make is not really a good plan, a good strategy for meal prep. And, for eating things that you like, eating is supposed to be enjoyable and it's supposed to be fun. And so, I went through I got really good going through those years of, just what's in the pantry, to just be like, what's in the fridge, what's in the pantry. And so to this day, I can open up a pantry and I can open up the fridge and I can throw an amazing meal together when everybody else in the house is like, we don't have any more food. And I'm like, what are you talking about? But I am much better at planning. I'm very strategic. I live with other adults. And so when they go out too, I also give them things on lists that I don't want to deal with. So it's like, hey, you're going there. Let me add this to your list. And, we're constantly transferring money back and forth, over Zelle, like, hey, get this. Okay, get that. And I love it. It works for us. So maybe that sounds familiar to you, or maybe one day you're going to get to look forward to doing that with your own grown adult kids. But I just remember, like, everything, I would just have that attitude. Like, it just has to play out. Everything just works its way out. And I'm a very spontaneous person. If somebody last minute comes and says, do you want to do this? A lot of times I can. Like, my life has gotten a little more complicated over the last couple of years to where I'm like, oh, I got to get my podcast done. I've got to get this grading done. I've got to work on this project because I promised my client, this deadline. But most of the time throughout my lifetime, I was able to just be like, oh, this will be here. Yeah, let's go out to dinner. And I could give 10 minutes notice and then I could be in the car and on my way to go have dinner with people. And this worked for me for years. And, people like my husband, it's kind of funny because we've kind of done almost like a 180. He's much more spontaneous. Like, he doesn't have a lot to do every day. So like any excuse to go out and do something, he's like, yes. Yes, I would love to do that. And it wasn't part of the plan. It used to stress him out because it would have to be his idea if it was spontaneous. Otherwise, he wanted to plan things out and know how it was going to play out. And now I'm a little bit more like, okay, what car are we taking? How are we supposed to dress for this? What type of a, place are we going to? Who's going to be there? I want to know all this finer details that I used to not care about at all. But part of my attitude back then wasn't just that I'm an easygoing person and I can just let other people have control and I like to just be with the people so I can have fun, which is still something that is true for me. But now I recognize that my attitude toward not planning, so there's a difference between being spontaneous and just not planning. And I was kind of conflating the two because it was just, I didn't really understand it, but I also had this kind of attitude rooted to not learning good strategies to plan things out to begin with. I didn't learn these types of strategies. I can remember like going to school and my friends would have outfits planned out for the week and they knew the weather and all these different things. And yeah, we can do that now because we have, our cell phones. We can just pull up the weather app and we can do a 10-day forecast and we can look hour by hour and those types of things. But that didn't exist when I was growing up. And I didn't plan and I didn't learn how to plan. Like that wasn't the way my household ran. And so I was the kid who was never dressed right, who instead of having a sweatshirt on with a t-shirt underneath it because everybody else knew it's going to get up to 90 degrees today, it was cold when I was getting dressed and I didn't plan ahead and I was just like, what am I going to wear right now? I have to leave the house in 10 minutes. That was the kind of kid I was. And I would just throw a sweatshirt on and then I would go and I'd be stuck in that sweatshirt all day because I still wouldn't even learn the lessons either. And so I didn't have good strategies for planning out for my personal success. And that's ultimately kind of what I want to drill into today is when we talk about like learning good strategies to plan things out, we have to be thinking about how we're going to be successful, not just like in our lives. We have to stop looking at like every time we think about goal setting and like being successful or experiencing personal success, that's great if we have these like end game goals in mind and these like, our 5-year plan and our 10-year plan and even our 1-year plan. And we're like, these are like milestone moments that we're working toward. But like every day of our life, we should be able to experience personal success as well. Like that's not a bad thing. We should always be thinking about how do we want this to play out? What are our expectations with the outcomes for this particular thing? And it might just be the day, going to work, going to school, staying home on a Saturday. What are my objectives? Sometimes it's like my daughters will call it like a hot girl rot day. I'm doing nothing. I'm sitting under my fuzzy blanket with my comfy clothes on, and I'm going to binge watch like whatever, fill in the blank. And then when I'm done binge watching that, I'm going to binge watch something else and please cook me dinner or something because I'm literally rot girling today. And that's fine, right? That's a plan too. And you have kind of things that you have to put in place in order to pull that off as well. And including unplugging from certain things that are going to distract you and pull you away from your ability to just have your little staycation day and do nothing inside. So we want things to play out a specific way. We can't just like think about that in our head and be like, oh, I hope for the best, like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. We want something better. We want something that will guide us, that sets us up to know what steps to take and what order to take those steps in order to navigate whatever is in front of us that day to find success. And whatever that success will just be different from day to day or from interaction to interaction, not even from day to day. We have to look at it from interaction to interaction and moment to moment, thing that we're doing to thing that we're doing. All of these things have some type of a plan attached to them or should have a plan attached to them. Even going through the motions is a form of a plan, even though you're not really being a good steward of setting up that plan and then even being aware of what steps you need to take in order to achieve certain things and, be able to fulfill that and move on to the next. And so my attitude about planning really changed in grad school. So I made it all the way through my undergrad career. Now I went to undergrad twice, once right out of high school, and then I came back again as a little bit more mature adult. And so now here I am in grad school, and I had never learned how to do planning. So here I am with a minor focus in my master's degree of teaching composition and college level writing. And we're talking about the importance of planning writing and teaching writing and planning courses. And I'm sitting in this with, my mentor is teaching the class, and she's talking about how we have to plan out a 16-week course and all this really fine focused stuff, which is amazing stuff. So Kathy, if you're ever going to hear this, thank you. And thank you for being patient with me in that moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is way too much planning. You have to just let the class kind of organically be, take whatever direction it's going to take and the students be involved. And then, eventually I stepped into a college classroom and spent a decade in them and realized, oh my gosh, students don't participate. They don't prepare properly for class. And if I had relied on that lack of plan as my plan to be successful in these classrooms, I would have failed. And my students would have not walked away with very many strategies and very many skills, because every class would have been very painful and awkward to get through. And so thankfully, I learned very quickly once I got into my own classrooms that not having a plan is not a good idea. And not having the detailed steps broken down and units and little things within that unit all planned out, all these finer details, is actually really, really helpful to have all in place ahead of time, because then you can go into autopilot and then you can be like, okay, I already know what this plan looks like. So you show up, you like, oh, what are we covering today? Or I would look at it like the night before, and then I would already be thinking about it because I already know these things because I've read the textbooks and I've planned the different, activities and learning objectives. And I do this for a living. So I'm a professional coming into the classroom and saying, let's talk about these things. And so it made it so much easier to teach. And it then set me up to not be scrambling and really like trying to really struggle through trying to get my students involved in the class, to being able to know what I was going to do in the absence of their engagement at first, to get them engaged, and then also to set myself up to be an active learner in those environments. And had I not been prepared and not been really thinking about and struggling through all those different things, I wouldn't have set myself up to be a participant fully engaged in these, classroom settings. So I'm very grateful for that. So what really helped it change wasn't my mentor making that comment when we were talking about how to plan out a course and me just totally being like, I don't think so. And she even said something like, well, Jennifer, good luck with that. That's awesome that you can be spontaneous, but the rest of us have to have a really good plan in place. And it didn't dawn on me in that moment that she was being kind of satirical and not sincere. But I really started to grasp organization and planning and the structure of units and things like that when I had to audit like almost 24 textbooks that I had to audit as a part of my degree. And I finally learned how to do all this pre-writing and outlining. So I hadn't really learned how to do all of this structured stuff in a specific order, how one leads into the other, and how this one is intended to function and what it's supposed to help do. And then that leads into this. So as I was auditing all these textbooks and learning for the first time some of these really key things, that I was just so frustrated too, because I thought, why didn't anybody teach me this? It was like by the time I got to college in certain classrooms, the teachers just expected that you knew these things, and then they never slowed it down and never called me out and said, why aren't you doing this? And so one of the other things was not just pre-writing, but outlining. I didn't know how to outline. And I used to be like, oh, outlines are stupid. The ideas just flow out of me, which is not entirely true. Now it's more true, but back then it wasn't true. I really struggled to be like, what do I want to say first? What do I want to say second? So as I was learning this from the textbooks, I also start writing my master's thesis. And, this is like 35 pages of actual text, and then your appendices and your research and your analysis of your research. And my whole thing was like 87 pages once it was all said and done. You cannot do that without having an outline and a plan. And the way that I used to look at outlines was, if a teacher said, you have to turn in all the stuff that you used for the assignment, and they would usually say like pre-writing and your outline. I would be like, okay, my free writing, which is just like, all right, that stream of consciousness, I'm going to write that down. And then I would write the paper, and then I would get done with the essay, and then I would go back and I would reverse outline. So I would reverse engineer my outline after I had the essay, and I would put that together, and then I'd be able to turn it all in. But as I started to learn how just really powerful and effective these things were, I was really like, it changed my life. So it made a lot of things in my life easier. So you can think about like, I'm just taking these English classes, or I'm just preparing to teach these English classes in my case. And, it's just essay writing, or it's just communications where you're teaching them how to, write all types of different communications, emails, resumes, cover letters, all those different things. But then you realize like, no, these are literal strategies for anything in your life. And I was thinking about when I was writing my first self-help book, which is one of the things I want to talk to you about in a second. But I was thinking about how when I was writing this book, I was writing about how there are certain things in our, when we're going through emotional healing and we're working through trauma and grief, that, we need to write things down, and we need to have a bunch of strategies to use to kind of like work through different things. And what I had realized kind of when I was putting this book together was, over the years, I've gone from hating to outline to falling in love with it. And the one thing that helped me fall in love with it was seeing outlining in a different way, which is mapping, or like cluster maps. There's all these different types of mapping that are essentially an outline, but they're not in that like Roman numeral kind of like very, like linear kind of a thing down the page. And that changed everything for me when I started to be able to like do these cluster maps where the bubbles and things were just all over the page. And then I was able to be like, okay, I could go and I could start numbering things, and like this idea belongs over here, and I can so easily find it in this space because I'm a visual person. And so this was just revolutionary for me. And so like when I was thinking about talking to you today about this, I was thinking, well, mapping is a great analogy for our topic points today, because we really do have to, when we plan something out, we have to map it out. So we have to create, what are the steps? What is the path that we're supposed to be on? What are some alternate paths? Like if you run into an obstacle or there's a detour, how do we go around it? And how do we get back on path? What type of vehicles can we use, to get through this terrain? And so there's all these different things that we have to plan out. What are the pit stops? I talked about a few of these things last episode also, but I love the idea of talking about this like you're creating a map and you're mapping steps out, because it's like you're going on a treasure hunt, and there's all these different spots that you have to stop. And then when you get to that spot, you're probably going to find a note. And then that spot's going to tell you where you have to go to the next spot. And sometimes navigating it, even though we can have a plan, often feels like that, where we won't fully understand the steps, or we won't fully know all of the steps until we get to the one part, we find the note, we look at it, and we go, oh, okay, so yes, I'm going to that next spot, and this is exactly how I can get there. And this is what I need to bring, in order to, deal with the weather here, and deal with the, the different types of terrain in this environment and all those different things. And so I did mention my first self-help book, which is Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free. And I do talk about in this book, in a couple of areas, I break down the importance of planning and, writing things down and using strategies and creating patterns. And so a lot of times our success can rely on bringing in effective patterns. And in the case of the self-help book, I'm really trying to help, assault and abuse survivors overcome the grief and the trauma associated with their experience, and really build and rebuild their confidence and self-worth, and set themselves up to live a fulfilling life and achieve that personal success along the way. And so at the back of that book, I have this 30-day restoration journey that lots of people use. So I have a lot of different coaching clients who utilize that. I'm coming up with a revised version of that for my Restore Your Inner Warrior self-help book that I'm developing to go along with this podcast. But another book that you may have heard me mention multiple times is the Book of Awakening. So Mark Nepo, the Book of Awakening. And it's just a devotion every day. It's a very interesting spiritual journey. It's not a religious journey, although there is a little bit of faith weaved in here. But this isn't your normal devotional. He has these really interesting, strategies that you can do after you've read the devotional. But I want to share this with you. This one is called, and it really ties into what I'm talking about today. And, the poet in me was like, oh, this imagery, this metaphor here is just arresting. If it doesn't just etch itself, like carve itself into your memory, then I don't know what I'm talking about then. But this one's called The Surface and the Deep. When under, remember the surface. When on the surface, remember the deep. When our days are turbulent and troubled, our challenge is to remember that the wave is not the sea. Though it pounds us, the pounding will pass. Though it tosses us about, the tossing will pass if we don't fight it. Often, our fear misleads us to stay in close to shore when the safest place is the deep. If we can get there, any swimmer knows, stay too close to the shore and you will be battered by the surf and undertow. We must swim out past the breakers if we are to know the hammock of the deep. Stay on the land or make it to the deep. It's the in-between that kills. And I thought, wow, what a great reminder about that power of like getting into the deep of it. There's that saying we tell people like, oh, I'm all in. You got to be all in. I'm really diving deep into this one. And there's some really powerful stuff when you connect it to what Mark is, encouraging us to think about and see here is that we have to go to the deep. So that's an interesting thing. And he tells us, it's like that, that saying, like, be really cold or really hot, don't be lukewarm. And I get that same impression when I'm thinking about this here is like, stay on the shore or go out to the deep. And we know, like, obviously the sea and the ocean, we know we're in another element and environment, and there are all kind of dangers that lurk when you go out into the deep. But the water is calmer there, and the water is different there. And, you don't have all the obstacles that you have when you're in the water that's closer to shore. And so that was a really, really powerful thing to think about. But also the thing that really jumped out at me there was how our fear keeps us rooted to those waters closer to shore. So in our fear, we misalign ourselves and we start to think like that we're safe. So we have a misperception of where our safety is. And we actually, in that fear and worry and self-doubt, just even though we're getting battered maybe, we just let our fear guide us and be the thing that is telling us what our plans should be, what our next steps should be. And so as I was thinking about, how does this apply to us also, is that, we're going to make these maps and we're going to plan out our steps in the course that we're supposed to take in order to achieve that desired outcome or achieve our goals or reach personal success. And even the wrong directions and places will be on the map too. So there's something to really think about there. Is that you're not drawing a map like a kid draws a treasure map where there's literally like an X marks the spot and the little dotted line and just a couple of landmarks. There's a full world on this map. It's not like the kid drawing. This is a real map where even the wrong destination and the wrong streets and the wrong paths and the wrong places, environments, they're all on the map. So don't think that, just because you're like, oh, I have a plan, and then it's just kind of like vague, like, oh, it's there. Like, oh, I know what I got to do. I mean, I did that, and it was an awful experience. It was an awful existence, and I really didn't know what I was missing out on until I knew what I was missing out on, if you know what I mean. And I don't want that for you. And so when we think about how we're planning out even how to deal with our healing. Like I've talked about the emotional and the physical healing, or coming out of an emotional or physical crisis, when we're like, we need to have a plan even to get out of that. So I'm going to talk more about that in the next episode and really break that down, but I wanted to kind of introduce us to some concepts here so that I can build on them next episode. When we set out to plan a trip, it's stops, it's different routes. When we pack for the different weather and the terrain, we have to think about what we want as an outcome during different parts of that journey. What is the process that you're using right now to plot the stuff out? Do you have a process? Do you do some type of pre-planning activities? Do you do some kind of research? So when you think about how you can do that for every single thing that you're trying to get through. So you're like, I'm just going to get through today. Here's what I have to do today. Here's what I have to get accomplished today, or here's where I have to go today. Then you have to think about like, okay, here's the day, here's what I have to do, here's where I have to go, here's how I have to go, here's what I have to dress like, here's what I have to bring with me, here's what I have to pick up along the way, here's who's going with me, all those different things. There's a process. And what is that process? I just want you to think about it. Like, what is your current process right now? Do you have a really fine focused process, and then you're so stringent about the finer details that you leave nothing to chance, and then you kind of become like a bridezilla about every little thing that doesn't go according to how you thought it was going to go? Or do you have like bouts of anxiety because you're like, oh, I can't deal with it when things don't go the way I wanted them to go? What is that process? I want you to be thinking about it. And I want to close with something that I shared in the closing of last episode. There's something key and invaluable about goal setting and personal success. So when we talk about goal setting or planning and personal success, we have to think about our success in the very moment and in the end relies on many planned stages, ones that we must at the very least chart out and plan for. To do this, we need to get clear on our goals and our desired outcomes in that moment. So what in that leg of the journey has to be clear to you? And that clarity needs to come in these smaller moments on different legs of the journey. We can't be so focused on the end, maybe that end that's the 5-year plan, that we don't know what anything is supposed to look like or how anything is supposed to play out in the in-between. So I want to leave you with that today, and I want you to be thinking about over the next week, what is your process? So how do you plan out even just working through some kind of emotional crisis or physical crisis, or maybe it's a relational crisis or a combination of these things? And what is your process? Do you have a good support network? Do you have a good mind, body, spirit kind of trifold existence? What does that look like? So I'll see you next week, and we'll pick back up on this, and we'll go a little bit deeper into what it means to goal set and plan for our emotional and physical healing. Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, follow my channel and share it with friends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. And if you're ready to get clarity and big picture vision on your goals, consider booking a one-on-one coaching session with me. Find a link in the show notes below to book a session. And as you go through your week, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Saturday. Ciao.